Dear viewers, in today's session, we have a great and energetic speaker, a beloved Dr. Moses John D. Wesley, with us, and he has completed his MRCP in UK and also did a fellowship in travel medicine from International Travel Medicine Society. He has also done a FCC fellowship in clinical cardiology. Today, sir will be taking a class on the topic headache case-based learning. And good evening, and I welcome you, sir. It is an immense pleasure to have you here with us.
A very good evening. It's so nice to be among you people.
Thank you so much, sir. So, dear viewers, if you have any queries or any clarification regarding today's session, you can just type them in the comment section below, and your queries will be clarified by our doctor at the end of the session. Sir, you can start the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I hope I'm audible to you all. Am I audible to you, everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's start now. Okay. Our today's session, we are going to start with the headache disorders. See, headache is a very, very vast disorder. Like almost each and every one of us would have had headache in one point of time in our life, and especially during our medical career, we would be having so much of headache with so much of things, especially during the exam times and during the viva, everywhere. Headache is a very common topic. The reason why I choose this topic is I wanted to start from the scratch. We are going to learn in an entirely different way. We are not going to just see the MCQs alone, or we are not going to just see the theory alone. We are going to read and learn everything in a case basis. Every single thing we are going to learn clinically. Actually, people, if you are listening to me, this is the ideal way to learn everything, whatever the subject may be. It may be anatomy, it may be physiology, it may be biochemistry. You correlate everything clinically and you learn. You will be the best ever doctor to come out. Okay, with that introduction, I am going to start the headache disorders. See, the first thing I want to tell you is you should know what are the common causes of headache. You should know what are the common causes of headache. I will tell you the clinical pointers and the important pointers you should know in the entrance perspective as well. Okay, let it be NEET, PG, or USMLE or PLAB, anything. You should be knowing everything. Okay, let me start. See, there are two types of headache. If you broadly divide the headache, you can divide the headache into two different types. The first type is the primary headache. The second type is a secondary headache. Now, what is a primary headache? Primary headache is the headache without any systemic cause. And among the primary headache, if you get an MCQ, what is the most common type of primary headache? It is going to be the tension type headache. We are going to see all the type of headaches in this session. And in the secondary headache, if you get a question, what is the most common type of secondary headache? Is a systemic infection. Predominantly in a OP based setting, in an outpatient setting, you will get patients with primary headache. And at the same time, in case of a inpatient based setting, you will get a secondary headache. With that, we are going to see what are the symptoms or signs which you can find, which can give you a clue, which can hint you that this headache is something to be taken seriously. These are called the warning signs, the red flag signs of a headache. For example, you are getting a patient and you are taking the patient's history. And if you find this patient's telling you these things, you have to take it very, very seriously. So, what are those things? First thing, if a patient comes to you and tells you, "Sir, this is the worst ever headache I ever had. I can't bear this anymore," that's an alarming sign. And if a patient comes and complains of a headache that progressively worsens over days, day one, it will be a little pain, day two, more, day three, even more, day four, totally disabling pain, then it is a red flag sign. And if there is a headache with some kind of abnormal neurological examination, obviously that is also a red flag sign. If a headache is accompanied with fever or vomiting or any other thing, like, then it is a red flag sign. If a headache typically induced by coughing, or if a headache is like aggravated when a patient tries to bend down or lift any heavy weight, then that is a red flag sign. These are the things, this table I will share with you at the end. You can go through this. You have to be very, very aware of an headache in a patient who is over 55 years old. You have to be very specific with the diagnosis. And if there is a headache that is associated with pain or tenderness, like if we supposedly, if in case of a condition called temporal arteritis, there will be tenderness around the scalp area. That is also a red flag sign. With this, we are going to start the session with the basic introduction. And how we are going to start the session is, I am going to give you a case history. I'm going to give you a case history. And you can answer this case history in the comment section if you know the diagnosis. From there, we are going to go about learning about that particular condition. Okay, here we go. Let's start our journey. Number one, case history number one. This is the most common scenario which you will enter in your clinical practice. Is a 35-year-old woman has been suffering from evening headache, which she describes as a fullness, tightness, and a band-like sensation starting from her neck, reaching over her occipital region for the last 4 weeks. And there is no vomiting, there is no photophobia, and there is no phonophobia. What is the diagnosis? See, when you get a case history, don't panic. First see the age. It's a 35-year-old woman. Next, sex. It's a woman. And then the type of headache. She describes it as a fullness, tightness, and a band-like sensation starting from her neck and occipital region. That's why I given this picture also. See where it exactly, like you can find the red dots here. These are the area, the region where this headache will be more prominent, or like a tight band-like sensation, like around the head. Here, the clinch pointer is nothing other than the tightness and the band-like sensation. And the point which helps us to rule out migraine or any other headache is there is no vomiting, no photophobia, and there is no phonophobia. You know, guys, what is the diagnosis? This is the most common type of headache we encounter in our clinical practice. This is nothing other than our tension headache. This is the most common type of headache. And tension headache is obviously more common in females than males. And one important thing about the tension headache is it will not affect a person's day-to-day activities. If a person is a student, it won't affect his studies, but there will be a headache. Typically, the patient will describe this as like a tightness or a fullness of pressure, like typically around like a band-like sensation. And other thing you have to note here is these patients will not be disturbed from sleep. There are certain headaches that will disturb the patient's sleep. The patient won't be able to sleep at all. They will anytime wake up at the night and they will call a doctor and they will rush to the emergency department. This headache will not cause such disturbances. And another thing you have to notice here is there are 33% association of this tension headache with depression. That people with clinical depression, there is a very strong association with tension headache. And also you should note, whenever you find any patient with headache in your clinical practice, always you should do the fundus examination to rule out the secondary causes. Now, how you will manage the tension headache? In an acute setting, you go for NSAIDs. If it is going to be a chronic headache, you have to go for amitriptyline. Okay, all right. Now we go for the second case history. Here we have a patient. See, think like a doctor. Think you are in a OPD and you are having a patient like this, and think and you can answer the diagnosis. Here is a 52-year-old woman on hormone replacement therapy. Note the first thing, like I said, the age and the sex of the patient. 52-year-old woman, and she is on what? Hormone replacement head therapy. Complaints of severe headache associated with photophobia, nausea, occasional vomiting. They typically affect the left side of her head, sometimes with flashes of light appearing in her visual field. They persist up to 12 hours and occur on average once every 6 to 8 weeks. What is your diagnosis? See the case history again. Is a 52-year-old middle-aged woman and she is on hormone replacement therapy. Second point. Third point you have to notice here is there is photophobia, there is nausea, there is vomiting. 3. Number 4, this headache is left sided. That means this headache is unilateral. It's not like a tension headache where we saw a band type sensation. No, this is unilateral. And you see here, this headache persists for up to 12 hours on an average once every 6 to 8 weeks. What is the diagnosis? I believe most of you would have got the diagnosis. This is migraine. This is migraine. This is not the common type of headache. Once then MCQ has been asked and many people made a mistake, most common type of headache, many people marked migraine. No, most common type of headache, you should mark tension headache. When it comes to migraine, this is characterized by episodic headache. This headache always comes in episodes. And the next thing is, there are two types of migraine. Broadly, there are so many other varieties of migraine also, which I'll be telling you. In broadly, if you classify, there are two types of migraine. One is a classical migraine, another one is a common migraine. The classical migraine is what we saw now, the typical case history. This is a migraine that is with an aura. This comprises of about 20%, but the majority of the cases, we won't see a classical migraine. We will see a common migraine or a non-classical migraine. This migraine will present without aura. So just because we see a patient and that patient doesn't have any aura, we cannot rule out that it's not a migraine. A migraine majority can present without aura. And the other thing, interesting thing, we should know why there is an aura in a migraine. This is due to movement of electrical waves. See, typically these electrical waves will move from your occipital lobe, then all the way it will travel through the other lobes. This movement causes the visual aura. And another very clinch thing if you find in migraine is many migraine patients, that in chronic sufferers, if you ask their history, they will tell at least 2 days prior to this attack, they will experience a severe mood changes. Just 2 to 3 days or 1 day before the attack, they will experience mood changes. And what is the pathogenesis of migraine? Why migraine occurs? There are two theories. One is a vascular theory, another is a serotonin theory. See, the main reason for the migraine pain and the migraine aura is nothing other than vasodilatation and as well as vasoconstriction. This both leads to aura. And typically, if you see, there is only one thing that is implicated, especially in migraine, is CGRP. What is CGRP? CGRP is nothing other than calcitonin gene related peptide. This is an extremely important pointer. You should know if you're preparing for your entrance examination. This is extremely important. Even they may ask you in the Viva also, calcitonin gene related peptide. This is an extremely important because this is a cytokine. See, we have trigeminal system in our brain. Okay, trigeminal nucleus and all. I believe, I don't want to go again there because it will take a long time. I believe you know the trigeminal nucleus. See, if there is a trigger that in the trigeminal nucleus, it will lead to the release of the CGRP, that is calcitonin gene related peptide. And now we found out clearly this is the reason for migraine. This is the reason for migraine. That is why today we have antagonist, that is a drug that can work against this calcitonin gene related peptide to treat the migraine. Today we have such drugs. And that is why trigeminovascular complex is what we call as the center of the migraine. If you take the Harrisons, it will beautifully, they're given on diagram. They will clearly explain that the trigeminovascular complex is the center for the migraine. Okay. Yeah. Now here we go. Yeah. Now, diagnosis of a migraine, always try to learn things in criteria hereafter, because as days goes by, we are going to have a lot of changes in the way they're going to conduct viva and a lot of changes in the way they are going to conduct entrance examinations, because mostly everything they are going to associate in a clinical way. So you should know the criteria. I'm here just giving you a very simplified diagnostic criteria for migraine. You should make sure any one of these two is there, like at least two of the following should be there. That is unilateral pain, a throbbing pain. The pain typically get aggravated by movement, moderate to severe intensity. Plus, along with that, one features of aura, like a nausea, vomiting, or a photophobia or a phonophobia. They will ask you in one MCQ, I believe they asked what is the type of aura you get. They given one very strange name that is called as a fortification spectra. I thought of adding the slide to here, but I forgot, unfortunately. That is a typical aura you will get. That is a fortification spectra. The fort-like appearance due to the stimulation of the occipital lobe you will get. That has a classical name called fortification spectra. Now here we go. Now what are the clinical features? Now this we already seen. It is a unilateral headache. Sometimes it can be holocrine also. It can be holocrine. That means it can be throughout the head also. It can be frontotemporal region is the most common region for migraine. And you know it is associated with nausea, vomiting. Have you seen migraine patients? I believe you would have come across migraine patients. You know, this migraine patients, you know what they will do when they get an attack. I know friends who are having migraine, they're big time consultants. Whenever they get an attack, they will immediately about their clinical practice, and they will tell, like, I'm not seeing any more cases for a while. They will immediately go to a dark room, turn off the lights, everything, and they'll prefer to lay down. That is what they want, because that will help them to relieve the pain a little. This pain will be very much aggravated by movement. And this is something called as Midas questionnaire. This you won't need to know because this is little postgraduate level. If they ask you in MCQ or anything like what is the questionnaire we use for migraine, this is called Midas questionnaire. What is Midas means? Migraine Disability Assessment Score. This is called Midas questionnaire. This you can use for taking case history for patients. And management, this is a very, very important area, because plenty of questions they can ask you in MCQ in migraine management. Repeatedly names and many entrance examinations, even UK or USML, you will get these questions. First, acute management. Nobody will ask much questions in this. I will tell you where they will ask you questions. Acute management for migraine, if you go, typically you can go for NSAIDs, naproxen, up to 550 milligram BD you can go, or you can go for ibuprofen. You have to add antiemetics such as domperidone, because they will have typical nausea and vomiting sensation. And moderate to severe attack, here you have to go for triptans. Triptans are 5-HT1B1D agonist. They are effective in classical migraine. Earlier, I believe you would have listened. I told you two types of migraine. One is a classical migraine, one is a common migraine. And if it is a rizatriptan, 5 to 30 milligram oral. And yeah, this is a MCQ pointer. Now note down. Now sumatriptan and zolmitriptan are used both oral and in nasal routes. We have a nasal spray for sumatriptan and zolmitriptan in triptans. This is how they frame the questions. Which of the following triptans is used nasally? Or they will tell all of the following drugs can be used intranasally, except they will give 4 options. This is how they form the MCQ. So when you're reading itself, when you're learning itself, correlate clinically and try to think in what way they will ask questions in this part. And sumatriptan can be given 6 milligram subcutaneously in case of a severe migraine. And there is this thing you should know, contraindications for triptans. We cannot give triptans to every patient. If a patient have coronary artery disease or a cerebrovascular disease, you cannot give triptans because it causes vasoconstriction. It cannot be also used with ergot alkaloids, ergotamine, the other class of drugs which we use to treat migraine. Now we go for the newer modalities. This is a point where you will get MCQs. I said earlier, the migraine pathogenesis, I said clearly, trigeminal vascular complex in the CNS, it releases a cytokine. What I said, CGRP, calcitonin gene related peptide. This is the cause for migraine, I said. Now we have developed an antibody against the CGRP. This is called erinumab. MAB, all the monoclonal antibodies ends with MAB. That is monoclonal antibody. This is erinumab. This is the drug. This is the picture of the drug I have given here. And sometimes if all the treatment, you try treating the migraine patient with the drugs, you try treating him with every single thing you know, and still if the patient is not responding, the patient is not at all responding, you have no clue what to do further, then you have to go to certain other therapies. There is nothing you can do about that. So we have some of the newer modalities. First thing is botulinum toxin A, Botox injection in the scalp that can reduce the intensity of migraine in some patients. Because also you should know the other uses of Botox, because Botox is used in various things, like in cosmetology, it plays a very major role. this botulinum toxin. And the other way we can control migraine is the greater occipital nerve block. The greater occipital nerve, if you block the nerve, it may help. It may help. I'm not sure it will 100% help. And the other way, you can try supraorbital transcutaneous stimulation. These are the newer modalities. We have to yet wait and watch how good these therapies are going to be, because every single day there is improvement, there is more and more research, and more drugs are coming out. Okay, now this is another major area you should know, guys. This is prophylaxis of migraine. Very frequently they will ask you MCQ, they will ask you in the viva, they will ask you in the short notes if you're doing your second year in pharmacology. The first line drugs we use for prophylaxis are beta blockers, that is propranolol, tricyclic antidepressants, amitriptyline, topiramate, which is an anticonvulsant. Here they will ask you one more question about the topiramate. When it comes to topiramate, they will ask you what is the one of the common adverse effect of topiramate is nothing other than nephrolithiasis, because topiramate can induce renal stones. And second line drugs, go for telmisartan, venlafaxine, valproate, and third line drug bisotifen, that is 5-HT2C antagonist, and funaricin and clonidine, it's an alpha 2 agonist. So these are the drugs you should be very well knowing. These are prophylaxis for migraine. And there's another question they will ask: what are the migraine equivalents in children? You should know. This is another question. This is an MCQ that has come, and this thing you should know: migraine equivalents in children. There are 4 conditions which is considered as migraine equivalent in children. There are many other, but these 4 are typically considered as migraine equivalents. The first is torticollis. Torticollis, right? That is Rhineck. And BPPV. BPPV, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, cyclic vomiting syndrome, and acephalgic migraine. These are all pediatric things, and these are all in depth you don't need to know, but you should know the names. These are the migraine equivalents. You should know this. Yeah. Now we go for other types of migraine. Broadly, I said migraine is divided into 2 types, that is classical migraine and a common migraine. Now, what are the other types of migraine? Beyond this classical and beyond this common migraine, what are the other types of migraine we will see typically? Okay, we'll go. So the first type of migraine we will see is that is called ophthalmoplegic migraine. This is accompanied by a reversible unilateral third nerve palsy. I hope you know the signs and symptoms of third nerve palsy and how it present. If we will discuss that more when we are coming to the session on stroke. I will explain you each and every nerve palsy and how it present and how to differentially diagnose each other. And then there is a condition called paraplegic and hemiplegic migraine. The name itself is self-explanatory here. And there is another condition called familial hemiplegic migraine. See, in the case of a familial hemiplegic migraine, this is a names question. They asked which is the most common channel defect, calcium channel defect, FHM1. It also can be due to potassium and sodium channel defect. 3 channels, FHM1, FHM2, FHM3. That is familial hemiplegic migraine. Have to know this. And then there is something called basilar migraine. This is due to posterior circulation issue. Our circle of Willis, blood supply to the brain. I believe you everyone know. If there is a problem with the posterior circulation, then typically you will get the symptoms along with the migraine. That is ataxia, diplopia, and headache. And there is another type of migraine called retinal migraine. In retinal migraine, the patient will have typical migraine-like features, but he will have a monocular vision loss. These are the other type of migraines you should very well know: ophthalmoplegic, paraplegic, familial hemiplegic migraine, basilar migraine, and retinal migraine. Okay. Now we go to the third case history. Yeah. Here we go. Now we have a 62-year-old woman who comes to see you in your OPD, and you're sitting there and she is suffering from a terrible paroxysm of stabbing and burning pain, which feels like someone stabbing a hot knife into her cheek. This is a typical case history, guys. Like, I have seen patients typically who are suffering from this condition telling this: sir, I feel like someone taking a knife and stabbing me through my cheekbone. This is typically they will describe this. Each time they occur lasting for 1 to 2 minutes. This attack won't last for a long time like migraine. The attack always occur on the left, can come at any time without warning, and when they occur, they tend to recur over the course of couple of days. Occasionally, they can be also triggered by cold, wind, or by washing the face. Neurological examination is completely normal. Now, just we will see the case history again. Just note down, like I said, age 62, sex, female, what she is suffering from, terrible paroxysm of stabbing pain. And when somebody gives a case history of headache, you should know there are certain clinch pointers. See, for example, if a tension headache case history is given, there is something that clinch the diagnosis. You will typically get a band like headache, in a migraine aura. Like this headache has a typical thing, like this is mostly triggered by a cold wind or washing the face. Typically, I've seen cases where a patient has this issue. He just woke up and went to the washroom and tried to brush his teeth. As he brushed his teeth, suddenly he took some water to gargle and immediately he had attack. He was just wincing in pain. This happened last week. He was calling in the lockdown. Like the attack started, I've been suffering from severe pain. Like this attack may be started by just a cold wind, or just if a water splash on your face, this attack will start. What is this headache, guys? This is nothing other than trigeminal neuralgia, one of the very painful condition. That is why the other name for trigeminal neuralgia is tic douloureux, because patient will wince in pain. This is a paroxysm of intense, brief, and shock-like pain. This pain will be mostly superficial, and this will be along the distribution of trigeminal nerve. And especially V2 component is mostly involved than V1. I hope and I believe you know the trigeminal nerve anatomy. It comes and divides into V1, V2, V3. Here the V2 is mostly involved than V1 and V3. This mostly you will observe this condition in patients who are 50 to 60 years of age. And it can last for a few seconds only, but the pain will be extremely terrible pain. Now you should know what are the triggers of trigeminal neuralgia. I will explain everything about the trigeminal neuralgia. You should know the triggers. Sudden eating or swallowing, suddenly it can precipitate. Change in weather can precipitate the trigeminal neuralgia. Some acute stress can precipitate trigeminal neuralgia. Sometimes tilting or bending head can precipitate. Sometimes patient may end up like they may listen to a joke or watch something funny in the television. They will start laughing. Suddenly the attack will come. And finally, like I said, brushing or cleaning the, they will get a trigeminal neuralgia attack. What is the pathophysiology of trigeminal neuralgia, guys? This is a compressive etiology. There are two etiologies basically in trigeminal neuralgia. One is a compressive etiology, and another one is a demyelinating etiology. If it is a compressive etiology, it is due to the compression of fifth cranial nerve by superior cerebellar artery. This may be an MCQ pointer, note down. Trigeminal neuralgia may occur due to compression of trigeminal nerve by, they may give you four options. It's due to superior cerebellar artery. You should know this. If it is a demyelinating etiology, you have to be very careful. It is a red flag sign, especially if a patient comes to you and complains of trigeminal neuralgia. You have to analyze whether this case, you have to ask history. If the patient is telling he has bilateral trigeminal neuralgia, you have to rule out multiple sclerosis. You have to know this pointers for Viva also. What are the causes of bilateral trigeminal neuralgia? What are the things you have to rule out? They will typically ask you the causes for bilateral facial nerve palsy. You have to study like that from the beginning. And what are the management? Typically, you start with carbamazepine, and with 100 milligram, you can give lamotrigine, amitriptyline, pregabalin. And many a times, what happens is some people, their symptoms will reduce with this drugs itself, and for some people it won't, it will go beyond that. So in such cases, that's what we call as medically refractive cases. If there is a medically refractive cases, here also see, like in migraine, here what comes to play a role, this is Botox. The botulinum toxin is like, it's as in a wide role. Subcutaneously you can give that. You can go for a microvascular decompression of the trigeminal nerve, and you can go for a gamma knife surgery, and you can go for a radio frequency rhizotomy. Forgive me, there is a spelling error there, for radio frequency rhizotomy. Because recently I referred one patient who came with trigeminal neuralgia. We tried all the drugs here. Now I have to refer to a neurosurgeon for the further surgical management, because he tried almost all the drugs, and so many neurologists have tried different drugs on him, and absolutely nothing worked. So these are the management in case of a medically refractive cases. Okay, now we go to the fourth case history. See here. Here is a 40-year-old man describes intermittent unilateral pain above and behind his left eye. Just carefully see here. It is an intermittent unilateral pain above and behind his left eye, which was woken him up from sleep every night. See, if you carefully remember what I said during the tension headache, those headache will not wake the patient up from the sleep. Even if there is a pain, he will simply lay down, close his eyes and sleep. Now, this is the type of headache that will wake the patient from the sleep. This happens for previous 7 days. The pain is described as severe and stabbing, lasting about 30 minutes and making him restless and agitated. It is associated with tearing from his left eye and nasal stuffiness. These are the clinch pointers here. Tearing in the eye and nasal stuffiness. When he looked in the mirror during the attack, he had noted his left eyelid drooping. He remembers he had experienced similar symptoms for about a month last year, but that they had resolved spontaneously. He had not sought medical attention. Physical examination is normal. He is a lifelong smoker. I want to tell you certain important things in the case history, guys. When you get this case, what are the things you should know so that reading the theory will be very easier for you and even solving the MCQs. First thing, this is a guy, a 40-year-old man typically coming, okay? And this headache is typically make him very restless and agitated. If you see the patient suffering from this headache, they will keep walking here and there. You will feel like they're having some kind of akathisia like that. And there will be tearing in the eye. Unilaterally, if it's a left side, there will be tearing in the left eye. They will have lacrimation and there will be nasal stuffiness. And there will be eyelid drooping. See here, there is an eyelid drooping. What it signifies, in which condition there will be drooping of the eyelid? You should tell me what are the conditions that can cause drooping of the eyelid. And other thing is, see here it says he's a lifelong smoker. I will give you one clue. This headache occurs commonly in alcoholics. Alcohol is one of the common precipitating factor. They will be normal even before taking alcohol. They will go to a party, they will have 2 rounds of alcohol, and suddenly unilaterally they will have severe headache. There will be tearing from their eyes, there will be nasal stuffiness. They will just go take some painkillers and try do whatever they can to alleviate themselves from the headache. This is nothing other than the cluster headache. This is a cluster headache. This cluster headache comes under a condition called trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. I will show you a differentiating table, a beautiful table which will help you to differentiate various type of trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. See how it presents. It is common in males. It is common in males. What I said in the tension headache, it is common in females. This one is common in males. This is an episodic. This is a short lasting. This is unilateral, and this is one of the extremely severe headache with autonomic symptoms and restlessness. It is a periorbital pain. This duration of this headache varies from 15 to 30 minutes anytime. There will be up to 1 to 8, 10 attacks per day. Like I said, it is precipitated by alcohol. I asked you one question when I was reading the case history. I said, what are the causes of drooping of eyelid? There are many causes, and one of such causes is Horner syndrome. Now, can you tell what are the components of Horner syndrome? Come on. Ptosis, meiosis, anhidrosis, loss of ciliospinal reflex. These are the components of Horner syndrome. These patients typically will have something called partial Horner syndrome. What is a partial Horner syndrome? You won't find them having all the components of Horner syndrome, but rather you will find 1 or 2 components of the Horner syndrome. This is called partial Horner syndrome. This is so typical of cluster headache. Now, the management. See, the acute attack, if somebody is having the first line management is going to be 100% oxygen with non-breathing mask. And obviously it's not possible all the time, and most patients will go to their nearby pharmacist and get their own medication and barge on it. And sometime, if other thing what you can do is you can give 6 milligrams subcutaneous sumatriptan. That will help you. For there are prophylaxis for cluster headache. The prophylaxis is divided into two types by neurology textbook. First type is a short-term prophylaxis, and next is a long-term prophylaxis. Short-term, you can go for steroids, and kind of long-term prophylaxis, you can go for verapamil or you can go for lithium. Now see, this is what I said. There are, if they ask you what are the trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. Trigeminal means what? It involves trigeminal system. Autonomic, it involves what? Autonomic nervous system. And what is cephalalgia? It is headache. Okay. They will ask you guys like, what are trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia? 3 conditions you should know. Number 1 is cluster headache. Number 2 is paroxysmal hemicrania. Number 3 is SUNCT. That is shock acting unilateral neurologiform headache, conjunctival tearing. Okay. Now this is a differentiating table. This will help to differentiate between 3 different types of trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. I'm not going to go to every single detail of this. I will tell you some of the very important features. First, cluster headache, if you see, it is more common in men than women. This is the first point you should know. Okay. Second thing, attack frequency you should know. Attack frequency is very much more in case of a cluster headache. I mean, sorry, in case of a SUNCT, that is 3 to 200 times a day they will have an attack. This is the second point you should know. And next thing you should know, all the 3 have migraneous features. And the other main important differentiating factor is alcohol will trigger only cluster headache. You should know that alcohol will not trigger paroxysmal hemicrania or SUNCT. You should know alcohol trigger only the cluster headache. Okay. These are the things you should know. These are the main points you should know. Just other things you can know the name, that will be more than enough for your examinations. Yeah. Now, I believe you would have understood, you would have got some points for your theory or for your practical and as well as your entrance examination. Now, I am going to conclude this session by discussing some of the MCQs. These are very important for you. I have carefully selected MCQs. I have selected MCQs from in terms of 3 things, right? Because 3 different type of people will be here. For MCQs that can be asked in NEET pattern, MCQs that can be asked in AIMS pattern, MCQs that can be asked in international pattern. Now all the 3 patterns I've selected, carefully selected certain MCQs for you guys. We will go and revise all these 10 MCQs. And after this, if you have any kind of doubts, you are feel free to type here. Even if it is getting late, no issues. You can leave your doubts in the comment. I will 100% answer all the doubts even now, and if it's late I will even answer before the next class. I will never leave before asking any before clarifying any doubts. Okay, we will start now. The first MCQ. Okay, the most potent algogenic substance is A, serotonin, B, histamine, C, bradykinin, D, prostaglandin, E, substance B. Now first thing we should know is what is meant by an algogenic substance. What is an algogen? Algogen is anything that produces pain. So among the 5, what do you think will be the most potent substance that causes pain? If you know the answer, you can very well give the answer in the comment section. Because if you see here, substance P can produce pain. Prostaglandins can produce pain, bradykinin can produce pain, everything can produce pain. But what they are asking, which is the most potent out of all they are asking, that is the glitch. As per the recent research and as per the textbook, the most potent algogenic substance is nothing other than your bradykinin. Your bradykinin. This is the first MCQ. Let's go to the next MCQ. Okay. We'll go to the third MCQ. Okay. I'll come back to the second MCQ again. See, third MCQ. Here, a 40-year-old banker came to emergency room complaining of intense headache. This is the type of MCQs you will get typically in case of a if you are appearing for AIMS or if you're appearing for any kind of international examinations. These are the type of MCQs you will get. Most of the questions will be case based. Even our next exam, which they are planning from 2022, is going to be case based only. A 40-year-old banker came to the emergency room complaining of intense headache. This intense headache is for 2 hours duration. The pain is localized around his right eye and is associated with tearing, redness of the eye. The patient reported he has had similar episodes over the last year. He also admit that these episodes occur every day for a few weeks with 1 or 3 attacks a day, which last for 1 or 2 hours, frequently at night. After 6 weeks, this attack stopped. He lost his job 6 months ago, has noticed an increase in intensity of the pain. Examination reveals drooping of the eyelid and small pupil on the right side. What is the most probable diagnosis? If you had listened to the class earlier, I told you this is a very, very common presentation of nothing other than what? Answer is
We got the
migraine
answer
or
from
tension headache, iritis, associated headache, cerebral tumor, or cluster headache. Which one is that?
we got the answer from the audience cluster.
Yeah, it is a cluster headache. Obviously, this is a cluster headache. This is the most common presentation. And I said, I asked you like, what is the Horner syndrome? And you will typically get a partial Horner syndrome feature in case of a cluster headache patients. This is answer is E, cluster headache. Now we go to MCQ number 4. Okay. Here we see a 35-year-old man presents with paroxysmal episodes of severe right periocular pain lasting for 15 to 40 minutes, associated with redness of right eye, lacrimation, and nasal congestion. The episode seems to be stereotyped around 1 hour. The attacks occur over a period of 6 to 8 weeks, then to remit, only to occur again after 6 to 8 months. Now you got the diagnosis. This is again cluster headache. That's why I wanted to back discuss this MCQ. Now the question is, what is the prophylactic treatment of choice? Is it amitriptyline? Is it aspirin? Is it lithium? Is it indomethacin, or is it propranolol? If you go back to the cluster headache PPT, I clearly mentioned you what is the prophylaxis. What is that? This is lithium. I clearly mentioned you what is the prophylaxis of the cluster headache, that is lithium. Or you can also try steroids as well. But prophylaxis wise, lithium is a better option. Now, number 5. This is what I asked you earlier. Which of the following drugs used for migraine is not available in nasal form? Ergotamine, sumatriptan, zolmitriptan, naratriptan. What is the answer, guys? Anybody got it?
No, we need to hold for another few seconds.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
And students in our meeting, you can just unmute yourself and answer the question.
I will take you back to that slide and I will tell you.
Okay, there is one person who have said it's ergotriptan and naratriptan, which is a proper.
Yeah, I said there are two things. See this slide now for you. See, there are two triptans are available in oral and as well as nasal. That is sumatriptan and zolmitriptan. And when it comes to ergotamine is also available in nasal form. Okay, so the answer for this question is going to be what? Naratriptan. Okay, yeah. Now we go to MCQ number 6. See here is a 23-year-old secretary presents to the neurology outpatients with continuous all-day headache. She describes a year history of frontal throbbing pain, worse at the end of the day, but occurring throughout the day without relief. In addition, she describes occasional exacerbation, unilateral head and facial pain lasting for hours to days. Okay, it is lasting for hours to days. And if you carefully notice hours to days and without relief, in addition, she describes facial pain lasting for hours to days, and as well as there is an intolerance to light. She denies nausea, vomiting, and other neurological symptoms. There is no significant past medical history. He takes paracetamol up to 4 gram per day and codeine phosphate 120 milligram per day without relief from her head pain. She has been taking the same preparation for around nearly 5 years. Got it? She's having a headache and she doesn't have any nausea or vomiting, but there is an intolerance of light. Okay, that is photophobia is there. And in the history they have given, she has been taking paracetamol up to 4 gram per day and codeine phosphate up to 120 milligram per day without relief from her head pain. She has been taking the same preparation for nearly 5 years. Okay, now we are going for the neurological examination. Absolutely normal. But only thing, fundoscopy, there is some visible venous pulsation. Now, what is your diagnosis? Is it A, migraine? Is it B, pseudotumor cerebri? Is it C, cluster headache? Is it is it D, analgesic overuse headache? Or is it SUNT? That is one of the trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. What is your answer? Anybody got it? Actually, I haven't discussed this headache. Okay, no problem. I will tell you the answer. This is answer for this question is answer D. Okay, this is not a migraine, because typically when there is a photophobia, you may have a temptation to go ahead and click it's a migraine. No, this is not a migraine. This is a headache called analgesic overuse headache. Why it's not option B? What is option B? Pseudotumor cerebri. That is a old terminology. What is the new terminology for pseudotumor cerebri? We call it as idiopathic intracranial hypertension. That doesn't present in this way. And this is not SUNT either. This is analgesic overuse headache. This typically happens in people who overuse or who abuse analgesics. There are people, because analgesic rampantly you can get left and right in any pharmacy in India, especially. These people, when prolonged, they keep on taking analgesic, that will induce a headache. That is called analgesic overuse headache. How you will identify this is, see, the last few lines of the case history is the glitch for the diagnosis. See, she's taking paracetamol up to how much? She's taking up to 4 gram per day, and codeine phosphate she's taking 120 milligram per day. This is the reason for analgesic overuse headache. You can clearly find out this. When you're asking history, you can tell some patients every day I'm taking 5-6 paracetamol, I'm taking diclofenac just like this, I'm going and getting, I'm just taking this and that, and I'm developing headache. You have to be very careful. You have to rule out analgesic overuse headache. The only treatment is you just stop the analgesic for a while, the patient headache will go off. This is a different case. I just wanted to add this along. Okay, number 7 is causes of thunderclap headache are all except subarachnoid hemorrhage, subdural hemorrhage, pituitary apoplexy, CVT, cerebral venous thrombosis, acute hydrocephalus. Anybody got the answer?
We'll wait for a few seconds, sir.
Yeah, sure, no issues.
We can proceed with the answer, sir.
Yeah, the answer is B, subdural hemorrhage. See, thunderclap headache you will get in acute events. Subdural hemorrhage, sometimes it may be chronic. See, subdural hemorrhage, you should know how it may present in some cases. See, there will be an old person in the home. It's an old man, old woman, a grandpa, granny. Sometimes they used to go ahead and they fall down. Once they fall down, what will happen is once they fall down for 1 week, there won't be any symptoms. There will be mild headache. It will progress. But the other conditions that is described here is not like that. It's a sudden acute onset subarachnoid hemorrhage. The patient will have typical thunderclap headache. These are the questions they will ask to like rule out things. See, typically we will be associating thunderclap headache only with subarachnoid hemorrhage. Not just that. It is associated with pituitary apoplexy, that is bleeding into the pituitary gland, CVT, venous thrombosis. Also during acute hydrocephalus, you can have thunderclap headache. Okay. Now we go to question number 8. Okay, this is a different variety of question. These are the questions you will expect in AIIMS and other institution examinations where there will be multiple answers. Okay, you review a 26-year-old woman who presents with transient disturbance of vision, frequent headaches. She also reports dizziness, diplopia on a number of occasions. Okay, she's describing dizziness is there, there is diplopia is there on number of occasions, and she has a body mass index of 32. Is it normal or abnormal, guys? Okay, and on examination there is a bilateral papilledema. On CT scan reveals there is no mass lesion. The lumbar puncture reveals a rise to opening pressure. You suspect IIT, that is pseudotumor cerebri. Why you suspect that? Because you put the patient in CT scan and CT scan is not revealing anything. The patient is perfectly normal. So you suspect it could be IIT, pseudotumor cerebri. So how they're asking you the question here, see, which 3 of the following risk factors are related to increased incidence of idiopathic intracranial hypertension? See, they have given up to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, E, F, H. So what do you think? Which are the conditions that predispose a patient to idiopathic intracranial hypertension? What is that idiopathic intracranial? This is what they call pseudotumor cerebri. Why they call it as a pseudotumor? Because there won't be any tumor at all. Pseudo means false. That's why CT scan revealed no tumor. And also you note in this case, this is a 26-year-old woman and her BMI is 32 and she has bilateral papilledema. This is how typically they will present to you, people with pseudotumor cerebri. Now they are asking you the etiology. What are the causes? Is it due to combined OCP, vitamin A excess, vitamin B excess, vitamin C excess, a BMI of more than 30?
There's an answer from the public. Option A, B, and E.
Yeah, absolutely correct. It's option A, B, and E. These are the 3 causes. Hypervitaminosis A typically causes pseudotumor cerebri, and combined oral contraceptive pills also causes pseudotumor cerebri, and then BMI over 30 also causes pseudotumor cerebri. Okay, yeah. Now let's go. This could be a difficult question. I believe you people will be able to answer this. The procedure shown in this picture below is used to treat. Is used to treat A, trigeminal neuralgia, tension headache, nummular headache, primary sex headache, subarachnoid hemorrhage. There is a spelling mistake here. I'm sorry. It's supposed to be E. So what is the procedure? If you know the procedure, you will be able to answer. Anybody? Okay, I believe most people would not have seen this. Nothing wrong. This is a difficult question. I will answer you. Okay. See, the procedure which they are showing there is this device is called collimator, which they use typically for gamma knife surgery. I already explained to you in my previous slides. Gamma knife surgery is used for what among all these conditions? Obviously, we are not going to put a patient with subarachnoid hemorrhage in a gamma knife. Definitely not. Tension headache, it does not need any treatment. Nummular headache is another type of headache. It does not need any gamma knife surgery. Primary sex headache, that's a type of headache that is described in textbooks and people do get before or after having intercourse. That is one type of headache, and none of this will need gamma knife surgery. Gamma knife surgery is needed for what? That is correct. Option A, that is trigeminal neuralgia. Okay, here we go. The last question. Now, a 34-year-old male comes to the accident and emergency. He complains of severe pain in his jaw and back of his throat and base of his tongue. See, he also complains of buzzing sound in his ears. What do you call that as? Tinnitus. An AP and lateral view of the cervical spine is shown here. Okay. What is your diagnosis? You can answer. If you just think properly, you can easily get the diagnosis. Is it a TMJ dislocation, or is it tonsillitis? Is it trigeminal neuralgia, or is it acoustic neuroma, or it is Eagle syndrome?
There's the answer from the audience, TMJ dislocation.
Okay, so you guys thinking it's a TMJ dislocation. TMJ dislocation, you know, it can cause pain in the jaw, back of his throat, but it does not always cause tinnitus. And you can see the X-ray where it is dislocated. Just carefully see the X-ray once.
Okay, a person in the meeting, it's Eagle syndrome.
Yeah, excellent. Who answered this? That's an excellent diagnosis. See the X-ray carefully. Where this red arrows are pointing at? Tell me, where is the red arrows are pointing at? See, most of us are so good in reading chest X-rays, but this is an ENT X-ray, and see where it is pointing out. Eagle syndrome is due to what? Elongated styloid process. More than 2.5 centimeter, if it elongated, it will cause a severe pain. This is called a Eagle syndrome. This is one of the causes of a headache. Severe jaw pain will be there on the base of the throat. And as a result of that, there will be tinnitus. There will be buzzing sound in the patient's ears. This is Eagle syndrome. Mostly they will try with painkillers, and obviously the styloid has to be removed at the end of the day to reduce the severity of the symptoms. Okay. And I hope we have seen headaches. Once again, summarizing, I have shown you what is the difference between a primary headache and what is the difference between primary headache and secondary headache. I said what is the most common headache. We saw about the tension headache. It's a band type headache. I told you the medication we need to take for, we need to prescribe for tension headache. Then we saw migraine. We saw the pathophysiology of the migraine. We saw the major type of migraine. We saw about Midas questionnaire for the migraine. We saw the drugs used for migraine. We saw the prophylaxis for migraine. And then we saw the latest modality of the migraine, including CGRP antagonist as well. Then followed by that, we saw about trigeminal neuralgia. We saw the cluster headache, and we have seen some MCQs, and I hope this session is useful for you. And in the future days, we can discuss about other main important neurological topics, which is most essential for your practicals and as well as your NEET PG or your AIMS or your international examinations, whichever you are preparing for. We will see more and more cases. Even next time I will try to include more videos which of actual real life patients which we can see and diagnose. I think last year or before year AIMS examination, they have put on a video case for diagnosis. I didn't attempt, but people who went and attempted the examination, they came and told me like there was a video question also. We will try to interact even more better using the technology, because till lockdown I don't think you will be having many of you guys won't be able to have a chance to see more and more cases. But we have to use this time to study as much as possible, because so once things have opened up, we have to go for examination only. That will be our situation. And I hope this presentation helps. If you have any doubts, you can ask, or if you have any doubts, you can leave in the comment also. Not now, even if you are watching this video tomorrow, day after, you have a doubt there, right away you can leave in the comment section. I am going to 100% answer all your doubts. Okay, thank you guys.